Yo, what's up guys, it's me, Then Weep here, back with part 7 for What If Deku Had Rewind. If you guys are new to the channel or just haven't watched the series yet, then make sure to go up here to the top right hand corner, and there you'll see a playlist with all the previous parts so you can come and catch up. Anyway, let's just get into this part for What If Deku Had Rewind. And so for the next 2 days, the villain teams, being the Vanguard Squad and the Yakuza Squad, would both be lying in wait for their respective targets, watching them from afar. Overhaul would be rather interested in Deku, seeing his unique abilities that he's witnessing through his training from Rewind. So, if he can use Rewind on not just living things, but physical objects as well, he can even rewind forward and backward in positioning. His control over the quirk is leagues and bounds ahead of Ares. If I can just get him, then I'll be able to use both physical rewind and bodily rewind through Eri and him. Oh, I can't wait to get my hands on his body, Overhaul would be thinking. Overhaul himself would have taken 4 of the 8 precepts of death with him, since he wanted to have 4 left behind in order to guard Eri. And these 4 precepts that he had taken with him would be incredibly useful in case he needed to absorb them against Deku. Seeing as he has control over his rewind to such mastery, unless they can jump him by surprise, which is unlikely, it would be very unlikely they'd be able to capture him with just Overhaul's power alone. The 4 precepts that Shisekai would have chosen would be Kendo Rappa, Hikiji Tengai, Hari Kurono, and finally, Joy Irinaka. All 5 members of the Yakuza's quirks were going to be rather important in order for them to be able to actually take down Midoriya. The one factor that Shisekai is not considering is that Deku also has One for All, which he hasn't seen much of yet, considering that he's so much tunnel visioned on the idea of using Rewind. So Deku's Rewind ability is the only thing on his mind. It doesn't come into his attention when he's watching how Deku's making such fast movements or how he's so physically strong. But we'll get back into that later. Meanwhile, we see the heroes are training, with most of them using similar routines to what they were doing in the original. Bakugo dipping his hands in hot water to expand his sweat glands before blasting a massive explosion overhead. We see Todoroki using his half-hot, half-cold ability by pretty much doing the same thing he did in the original, just using a big jug of water, and then using hot and cold on it over and over again to practice switching between the 2 quirks, and also practice his heat regulation between his body. Anyhow, aside from the other members of Class 1A, we would then see Izuku Midoriya, who would also be doing his own training, using both Rewind as well as One for All. Deku is working on his own technique, or, well, I guess you could say it's more of a habit than technique he was trying to build, as Deku's working on trying to increase his pain tolerance. Deku would continuously be using Rewind on his body over and over again, as he charges 100% of One for All into his body, full cowling. Deku would be flashing, glitching, and as his body would be continuously ripping itself apart and then rewinding itself back into position. So to the average person, it looks as if though he's just standing there, with random flashes of electricity charging off of it. An effect of this that would actually help Deku is that while Shisekai is watching through binoculars, the ground under Deku would continuously crack and then fix itself from Rewind and One for All's effect. So Shisekai would be thinking that Deku is training to affect non-living things by repeatedly breaking and then unbreaking the ground with Rewind, which would be what he thought he was doing, when Deku is actually working more so on One for All, using Rewind to deal with the pain, as he continuously feels himself and getting used to One for All's ability at 100%. God, it hurts so bad. Every cell of my body is burning, over and over again. It's like I'm being tortured. I feel like I'm dying. Ah! Deku would fall to the ground as he falls out of his One for All, cowling, and Rewind state, continuously looping with each other. As he falls to the ground, smoke would come off his body, as he now lays there for a bit, laying, and begins breathing in and out rather heavily. Midoriya, are you alright? Aizawa would say as he walks over, seeing Deku laying on the ground. Yep, I'm just peachy, Aizawa-sensei. Deku would pull himself up, brushing himself off and putting the dirt back on the ground, as he would then get back into his stancing position, saying he's got to get back to it. The ground would crack again as he begins gritting his teeth, his face looking strained, as sweat continues dripping down his face. His body would all look buffed up and tense, as his hair would be flowing around his face, his horn now having electricity now raging over his entire body. As Deku would continue practicing using Rewind on his entire body continuously, while using 100% of One for All. His bones would feel like they were cracking from the amount of times he'd been rewinding and using One for All 100% on them. After another hour, Deku couldn't take it anymore as he falls to the ground, his stamina having pretty much completely drained. Deku would be one of the first ones to drop out as he falls pretty much unconscious. Everyone who had been watching around him would have been pretty freaked out seeing the amount of times that he screamed in pain and how many times he'd fallen over. But now that he was finally knocked out, the screaming had stopped, so that was good. Overhaul himself wouldn't have heard the screaming since they were way too far away. He would have just seen Deku falling over a few times, thinking that it has to come down to how difficult Rewind must be to use, since Eri on the other hand has pretty much no control over Rewind at all. So it makes sense to him onto why he'd be struggling using it. Midoriya would have been let off the hook for today, putting him back in his room where he was now sleeping. After a couple more hours of training, the other students would then also turn in as they decided to get dinner, with them making their own. Everyone would eat except for Deku, who was still knocked unconscious, and Bakugo would laugh saying what a weakling. And everyone who had been around Deku when they were training would look back over to him with a grimace, after seeing the amount of pain Deku was in. Deku at this current point in time can only maintain that rewinding 100% state for 1 hour, before his stamina completely runs out and he's unable to use Rewind or One for All for quite a while. Eventually a few more days would pass with nothing going awry, just like it had in the original. That is, until eventually it would come for the night of the test of courage, just like it had in the original. At this point in time, Deku had already figured out where Koda's secret hiding spot was from the past few days when he'd gone to go and get Koda for dinner, since he'd actually have not been unconscious during those days. Anyhow, it was eventually time for the test of courage, one of the final events for during that summer training camp itself actually. And everyone would pretty much be in the same spots that they would have been in the original, when suddenly the villain's attack would begin. As smoke begins descending across the entire landscape, the Vanguard squad would then go on to go and try and find their target, and the Yakuza would take the opportunity of this chance to try and find Midoriya themselves. Midoriya, as I would say. Yes, I got it. Rewind! Deku would activate Rewind as he touches the smoke. As he does so, he'd cover his mouth with his other hand, as the smoke begins to rewind itself back towards the start from where it came from. The quirk users of the smoke would be shocked, wondering what's going on, as all of his smoke begins returning back to him and compressing itself back into his body, back to where the quirk originated from. Suddenly, Kendo and Yaoyorozu would show up, along with them being Kirishima and Tetsutetsu. As all four of them would show up against the villain, they would take them down pretty easily, as the other villains would realize what's going on, seeing as Deku had been using Rewind. Smart, Chizukai would be thinking, this isn't gonna be easy, but I'm not going to give up. All 5 of the Yakuza would then descend on the area itself, seeing Deku. Let's do this. Deku would suddenly start running away as he had been heard something from one of the Bobs. What? They begin to follow him as they all run through the forest. Suddenly, electricity began to cover Deku's body. What's he doing? Overhaul would be wondering. Suddenly, Deku began moving faster as he begins leaping from tree to tree. What the? Can Rewind do that? He'd be wondering. Doesn't matter. We have to get moving. Rappa! Rappa would pick up his other comrades as he begins running at full speed using his quirk, saying they can't let him get away. Deku would suddenly arrive at Koda's space, where the Pixie Bomb had told him to actually grab Koda and make sure he was safe, with them not even knowing where he was. We would see Muscular standing there as Koda was in fear. Hey, you there, villain! Get away from Koda! As Muscular would turn around, seeing Deku, it'd be already too late. As Deku was using 25% of One for All, he'd be moving forward. Muscular began blocking his body with muscles, but it wouldn't matter. The moment that Deku touched him, the fight was over. Overall, I'll be watching in awe as Deku activates Rewind at the last second. Your biggest mistake against me was being a close-range fighter, because that's the greatest weakness to anyone who ever has to fight me. Rewind! Deku would use Rewind as he touches Muscular, with Muscular having no idea what's happening. As his muscles would begin receding back into his body, he'd realize that this kid has some sort of anti-quirk ability. He began pushing out his muscles even faster, at a faster rate, and Deku would be trying to keep up at the same time, with them now being in a standstill. The Yakuza would take opportunity of this, as Rappa comes moving forward trying to knock Deku out from behind. Look out! Koda would say. Deku would turn around just in time, as he uses his other hand blocking Rappa's fist, using One for All. Ah! The fist would strike into Deku's arm, as Deku would fight back. I can't afford to lose here, Deku would say. He would then activate both Rewind and One For All 100%, as his Rewind and One For All destruction speed would then come to a match. Suddenly, Deku's hair began to float over as his hair would rise, electricity began to spark over him, as his eyes have an electric green look to them. Deku, when he's using Rewind on himself and One For All, cannot use Rewind on other people's bodies. Basically, as long as he's focusing on counteracting One For All's effects, he can't use Rewind against anything else. Muscular began growing muscles, but it wouldn't matter. As Deku simply throws a small jab towards him, he'd go flying across the forest, getting knocked down a single hit, crashing through a mile of forest before eventually stopping, completely knocked out and down for the count. Rappa would be shocked as Deku's eyes would turn towards him next, flickering on him. Rappa would only have a split second, and Hikaji would then step in using his shield ability, which can absorb shockwaves, jumping in just in time, as Deku throws another punch, faster than the eye can see. Both Rappa and Hijiki would be sent flying backwards, the punch just shattering Hijiki's shield, as Rappa and himself would be sent flying back, but not nearly as far as Muscular. Overhaul would see this strength and take this opportunity. I need to take him down now. As Overhaul jumps out from the woods trying to grab Deku, he would reach him just in time as Deku was distracted. Another villain? Deku be thinking. The moment Overhaul pulls his glove off as his hand touches Deku, Deku's entire arm would fall off, as Deku would be shocked. Suddenly, Deku would activate Rewind at a faster rate, as his arm would begin to regenerate, completely growing back. Overhaul would be shocked as he sees this regeneration speed, as Deku would then prepare to throw another punch. Overhaul would quickly use his quirk, Overhaul, to pull some stone from the ground, blocking the punch just and barely, as the stone along with Overhaul gets sent flying backwards, knocking him into a tree. Damn it, you made my hand dirty. He begins scratching in his hand, thinking that it's so disgusting how he had to do that. Deku would be shocked looking down his other arm, which had just been disconnected from his body, as he looks down his new arm. What was that quirk? Deku would say he needs to take care of this fast, as his stamina won't be lasting as long as it usually does since he'd been training earlier that day. I maybe have 5 minutes where I can maintain this form. I have to make sure all of these guys are taken out now. While Deku was thinking of that plan, Overhaul would have grabbed the other two, using his Overhaul ability, making his arms buffer, and grabbed them and run, saying they need to get out of there. He's way too strong. That is not Rewind. There's no way. That's a strength enhancer quirk, and it has something to do with his Rewind, but is it possible he can have 2 quirks? No. There's no way. I'm gonna have to go back and run more tests on Eri. Deku would tell him, hey, wait, as he tries to run forward, stepping forward at fast speeds. Overhaul would quickly use his Overhaul ability on the ground, creating many spikes and trying to block Deku's path. Prioritize human lives, Deku would be thinking. Those guys gave up really easily, but I can't blame them after seeing what happened to that other villain. Deku would turn back to Kota as he deactivates his Rewind and One For All at the same time. Are you okay? Kota would nod, saying, and thinking, that's my hero. Huh? Deku would wonder. Kota would tell him to shut up as he says nothing, with Kota smiling after seeing Muscular, the guy that'd be his parents like that, completely overwhelmed by a hero. I guess some heroes can really beat the villains, huh? Deku would pick up Kota as he says that they need to get back to the area, as Deku would then use 25% of One For All, as he begins running through the forest, jumping from tree to tree. The Yakuza begin withdrawing, saying that Overhaul himself, he can't fall here. They're still working on developing their anti-quirk bullet. If only we can get a few more anti-quirk bullets. If I can shoot him with one, and take out his quirk temporarily, then we can capture him. That's gotta be the only way, Overhaul be thinking. The Yakuza can't die here. I'll use Eri. I'll find a way to counteract Rewind, and whatever else he has as well. I'm going to take you, Izuku Midoriya. Overhaul would then call back the rest of the Yakuza he had taken with him, as the Yakuza group would then escape, saying they'll be back for him some other time. The League of Villains, on the other hand, would continue strong, with now that Deku had been distracted by Muscular and Overhaul for a decent amount of time, would have gotten the rest of their plans pretty well done, with Dabi and Twice using their clone strategy on Aizawa. Now it was about time, as Mr. Compressed was about to abduct Bakugo. They could make it back to the campsite pretty fast and drop Kota off, saying that he's got him. They would thank him for saving Kota. Kota would then be put inside to be kept safe. At this point, Aizawa had already sent out the message to the students, saying that under his authority as a Razorhead, he was allowing them to use their quirks to defend themselves and fight the villains. So Deku would then head off trying to go find the rest of the hero Class 1A students and Class 1B students, trying to find where they were and what was going on with the villains. Suddenly, a jab of darkness would slam into Deku. What was that? as he slams into the tree, shattering it. He would then fall to the ground, feeling a bit weak as he's shaking. Deku pulls himself up, and as he looks up, he would see Dark Shadow rampaging across the land. As another strike from Dark Shadow was about to crash into Deku, Deku would jump out of the way, leaping. Deku would try to use Rewind as he touches the darkness, trying to rewind the Dark Shadow back to its original state. But it didn't work. What? The darkness isn't a physical object or a living thing. It's an energy, so I don't think you'll be able to rewind it using your quirk. Standing next to Deku before grabbing him and jumping away from the next attack, we would then see the duplicate arms user, Shoji? We see Shoji and Deku as they're now moving through the forest, with Deku saying he's fine, he would put him down, as the two continue running, with Deku using One for All to increase his movement speed. Shoji, what do we do? How can we stop Dark Shadow from rampaging like this? Shoji would say he doesn't know, but he does know that Dark Shadow's a weakness to light, so if they can get Todoroki or Bakugo over here, then it might be possible. Conversely, the two groups would be running towards each other almost at the same time, as Deku and Shoji would be leading Dark Shadow away from the rest of the main campsite. Bakugo and Todoroki would be together as they're running from the Moon Tooth user, the guy with the long metal teeth that just keep expanding, as they've tried using explosions and flames and ice, and he just keeps breaking through all of it. As they're running closer together, we would see Bakugo and Deku make eye contact. Hey, we were just looking for you. We actually need... Deku, get out of the way! Bakugo would say, as he and Todoroki jump to the side. Deku and Shoji would do the same as Dark Shadow crashes into a moonfish. Dark Shadow would begin to overwhelm him as the darkness would begin cracking in the guy's teeth as he'd eventually be ripped from his skull. As Moonfish would then fall to the ground, being defeated by Dark Shadow. We need you guys to use your... Yeah, we know. Bakugo would use explosions, and Todoroki would then use his flames until Dark Shadow is tamed, causing the darkness to recede. As you then see Tokoyami just sitting on the ground, completely passed out, before opening his eyes a bit, saying that was intense. Thanks, guys. Almost as if though on cue, Deku would have no time to respond, as his stamina is low from using Rewind and One for All, and having to carry Koda all the way back, and everything else he's just done. Kachan! Suddenly, Bakugo would have been grabbed, as we see him, Mr. Compress now with a pearl in his hand. Put Kachan down right now, Deku would say, as he's beginning to charge One for All across his body. Mr. Compress would begin running away, as Deku leaps into the air, catching on the tree. Midoriya, wait, Todoroki would say, but he would already be running, as Mr. Compress would be laughing, saying he's got the target. He would now have two pearls in his hand that he grabbed, a stick and Bakugo. He would immediately drop one of the pearls and then start running away, as Deku would leap trying to grab it, thinking that he must have ditched Bakugo and ran, not knowing that the villains were actually after Bakugo himself. As he grabs the pearl and begins shattering it, the pearl would break open as just a stick's on the ground. What? He would then jump back up as he tries to find and get Mr. Compress, but it's too late. Just as he's about to enter the portal, Bakugo would be released from the pearl, as he reaches his hand out telling him, Deku, don't come! Izuku would stop moving, sliding to a stop, as he would reach his hand out towards Bakugo. Kachan! The villains, along with Bakugo, would disappear, as the Vanguard squad has successfully captured Katsuki Bakugo. If you guys want to see the next part of What If Deku Had Rewind, make sure to slap that like button, comment down below what you thought, and subscribe to my channel for more What If and anime content from me. I'll see all of you guys in the next one. Goodbye.